I know you've seen Derry in the movies and the miniseries, but had it been possible for you to visit the town from Maine, you would notice that it looks like any quiet small town with tree-lined streets, clapboard houses, and a tidy Main Street clock tower. But behind this quaint facade lies a legacy of dread filled with blood, bones, and all things horrific. Decades of mysterious mass disappearances, mass murders, and other odd tragedies are what define Derry. And yeah, each of these grimdark incidents is linked to an otherworldly entity best known as It, or Pennywise the Dancing Clown. The other strange part about this town is that it seems to actively forget each of these tragedies, as if it protects the monster itself. That's why, in this video, we're going to explore every incident that shook Derry and should have made people steer clear of it. So, if you're a Derry resident, this is your warning to get out of Dodge. We're ready to begin, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we do have a very quick request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The arrival of It, the ancient beginning. You and I both know that, according to Stephen King's lore, It, the child-eating entity, isn't a born and raised clown named Pennywise, but a predator from another reality. It crash-landed on Earth roughly 1 million years ago, but found that there was no food source as such, nothing that it used to eat where it was before it came to Earth. According to some, the Barrens in Derry, a swampy wetland, is where the creature crash-landed, but for some reason, it chose to stick around for 1 million years. Why it never moved on from Derry, Maine to anywhere else is anyone's guess. I mean, we know that it can travel between realities, so why not geographically from one point to another? Whatever the case may be, it lay mostly dormant in Derry, Maine, waking up periodically to feed on its residents, up until it met little Georgie. Oh, and we nearly forgot. Please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. And now, with that out of the way, let's continue. After waking up from its super long slumber, It soon found that human children were its easiest prey. With no alternative food, it fed on those children. And while humans need 3 square meals a day, this vicious demonic entity started waking up about every 27 years to feed. In fact, the creature still resides partially in an alternate dimension, a so-called macroverse, and manifests on Earth only to hunt. But, as we were saying earlier, it never really leaves the town of Derry. Whenever it has to eat the fresh batch of young children, it comes to Derry and nowhere else. Before consuming its victims, the entity often transforms into each child's worst fear. It even calls this process salting the meat to make the prey taste better. And you know what? There is actually a real-life analog for this behavior. You may have heard that slaughterhouses and butchers should try to keep the animal calm and stress-free before the slaughter. Why is that? Well, besides ethical reasons, when under high stress, the glycogen in your cattle or chicken's muscles is used up for hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, raising the pH of the meat and affecting the quality of it. When meat has high pH, oxygen cannot diffuse deep into the muscle, so basically, the meat becomes more acidic. The same must happen with human children, and it is possible that It likes to eat acidic meat, and maybe should go try some xenomorphs instead of those poor children in Derry. You know, since they have acid for blood and stuff, right? Right? Anyways, the It entity's true face is unknown, so it most often appears as Pennywise the Dancing Clown, a guise adopted after seeing a 19th century circus performer and knowing that clowns both delighted and terrified children. Interestingly, when Bill Denbrough faced it, he met Maturin, an ancient cosmic turtle who helped create the world. This gentle guardian explained that It follows an age-old cycle. It feasts on fear for about a year, then vanishes into sleep for roughly 27 years before it rises again. In effect, the turtle hinted that as long as It lives, Derry will remain cursed, and that's precisely why every grim chapter of the town's history is tied back to this evil clown's cycle of waking up almost every quarter century. Bill learned that defeating It requires a contest of wills, not bullets. Armed with this sky-rending and reality-bending knowledge, the Young Losers Club performed the ritual of Chud and drove it back into its long hibernation, but not before the monster had caused numerous disasters, so let's take a look at some of these dark events. We begin in the early 18th century, and more specifically, 1715 to 1714, the founding of Derry and the first mass disappearance. Even Derry's origins are drenched in murder, mystery, and of course, blood. A lot of blood, actually. So the town of Derry initially didn't house humans, and even the Native Americans mostly steered clear of the region. Then, Christopher Columbus found America in the last decade of the 15th century, and soon after, Europeans from all nations started flocking to the place. It wasn't long before French trappers appeared in the region that we now call Derry, and I'm sure there must have been a few incidents, but we have little to no records of such incidents. There is some report of a mishap from 1715, but nothing more than that. However, a few decades later, a company, presumably of British origin, set up what they would call the Township of Derry. This was the beginning of the recorded horror. Almost 340 people lived here in this township, including families with women and children, but one day, in the year 1741, something happened, and all of these people disappeared without a trace. The town remained, the houses remained, but the people went missing, vanished. There are legends about this event which speak about strange dancing figures on the riverbank, but the strange part is that the official records were quickly rewritten as if the disaster never happened. Someone wanted to erase the memory of how Derry Township became a ghost town. If it was some businessman trying to settle another town on the grave of this former township, or if it was it, the entity, we don't know. But what we do know is that soon after, the town was quietly rebuilt on that same cursed ground. And that, my friend, set a pattern of horrors. Derry would rise from each horror with everyone's memory wiped clean, unknowingly inviting it back to feed again later, quarter century later, for several centuries to come. After that first shock, Derry's citizens started to act strangely. You see, the past had been buried once, and now, this loss of memory had also become a pattern. Town officials kept silent. The disappearance was scrubbed from history. In fact, decades later, the community dated its founding from the 1790s and totally glossed over those earlier years. And just like that, nearly 100 years of history was stricken off. In fact, Stephen King explicitly likens that early Derry event to the famous Roanoke Island in present-day North Carolina. Governor John White sailed to England for supplies, but was delayed by the Anglo-Spanish War. When he returned in 1590, the colony was deserted, with Croatoan carved on a palisade and CRO on a nearby tree, but no distress crosses, no bodies found. Theories include relocation to Croatoan and Hatteras Island, assimilation with native tribes, starvation, disease, attack, or drought. And today, the Roanoke colony is regarded as America's lost colony and one of its earliest mysteries. So, yeah, coming back to Derry, it seems like the town covered up every calamity as if by defense mechanism. This collective amnesia became its greatest ally, and to be honest, if no one remembers the horror, no one connects the dots. The town's own nature ensured that it would always lurk undetected for its next cycle. 1851. The Ironworks Explosion. The mid-19th century brought Derry's first industrial era, and along with it came new forms of horror. As the town grew, its lumber mills and ironworks drew crowds of laborers from all over the neighboring regions, only to become fresh targets of the evil that lay hidden in Derry. In 1851, a double tragedy occurred. According to later accounts, and hinted at in King's notes, an entire logging camp of Irish mill workers simply vanished overnight. Soon after, the Derry Ironworks factory was demolished by a massive blast, killing scores of men inside. Officially, it was chalked up to equipment failure, but this explained nothing. In reality, hundreds of laborers had just disappeared, much like those colonists from Derry Township who disappeared in the year 1741. But, as we mentioned earlier, 1851 was a year of two tragedies, and the second was yet to come. This one centered around a man named John Markson, who inexplicably poisoned his own family and then himself, adding to the bloodshed. He had several children, and on one fine morning, the authorities found his dead body sitting upright in his own house. And surrounding his dead body were the corpses of his children and his wife. This man, John Markson, had poisoned them using the white nightshade mushroom before doing the exact same thing to himself. By the late 1800s, Derry's old maps already showed scars, ruined camps and decaying mills. Locals whispered that something in the river, the Kentuskeg, was taking people. In other words, those early tragedies filled the soil with misery. Every disaster did more than kill people. It steeped the town in fear and forgotten sorrow, making Derry an ideal hunting ground for it. It's unclear if the Markson family mass murder was at its command or a separate madness brought on by its presence, but it only heightened the sense that Derry's 1850s were blood-soaked years. By the time the next century arrived, Derry's collective memory was fractured, and every mystery had fed the darkness beneath the town. And if you think about it, the process of killing children had already started, but it only got more pronounced and exacerbated half a century later. 1908. The Kitchener Ironworks Explosion, the Easter Tragedy. In 1906, Derry suffered its worst peacetime disaster. The Kitchener Ironworks, a lumber mill, suddenly exploded during an Easter egg hunt, killing 88 children among 102 total victims. All power to the factory was off at the time, so the blast was inexplicable. The prevailing theory is that it sabotaged the machinery to spread maximum terror. The official report attributed the disaster to an unseen accident. After the blast, charred bodies were retrieved from the river, but disturbingly, 8 children's bodies were never recovered. The images haunted Derry. The ruins of the Kitchener Ironworks became a sinister landmark, and in 1958, a young Mike Hanlon would see its shape there in the form of a giant bird. Most importantly, the explosion marked the end of its feeding cycle. Afterwards, the creature returned to slumber for 27 years. 2 years later, in May 1908, Derry was pummeled by one of its worst floods. Storms swelled the Kentuskeg River to unprecedented levels. Historical reports count 36 dead in total, including 7 children. This sudden deluge destroyed homes and erased streets, yet was written off as a freak natural disaster. You see, it had fed itself once again, and after this flood, the creature slipped back into dormancy. To the outsiders, it was bad weather, but to those in the know, it was Pennywise cleansing the slate. Between the Easter explosion and the flood, Derry had steeped in unimaginable horror, exactly the feast it needed. 1929. The Bradley Gang Massacre. By the late 1920s, it was drawing blood from the townspeople themselves. In June 1929, the notorious Bradley Gang, which consisted of a few bank robbers, attempted to escape through Derry and were ambushed by an armed mob. In moments, every one of the outlaws was ruthlessly gunned down by citizens and even family members on the street. It was a massacre dressed up as frontier justice. Officially, newspapers blamed it on angry citizens and heroic self-defense. However, witness accounts whispered a darker truth. A boy named Norbert Keene, who survived, later told Mike Hanlon that many participants remembered seeing a clown in the line of fire, and some said the clown even fired a gun. Others swore they glimpsed Pennywise floating outside a window watching gleefully. It was as if the entire town had been hypnotized into a bloodbath for its pleasure. Afterwards, the media played it off as a routine shootout, and Derry returned to quiet. No one questioned the heroic narrative. To Derry's people, it was just another terrible day, but nothing unusual or out of the ordinary. It was as if they seemed to accept these bouts of violence and bloodshed. Stephen King's own notes confirm how this event was buried. His timeline notes that Derry pretended it never happened. Decades passed before anyone in the town even dared to mention it. Yet, for those who lived it, the Bradley Gang Massacre was proof that Pennywise could turn Derry's entire population into its accomplices. It fed on the frenzy, feeding its awful strength, while the rest of the town moved on in enforced silence. And, while it scared children to make their meat tastier, it played with the baser instincts of the town's adults as well, instincts that are related to a thirst for blood and violence. 1930. The Townhouse Fire. The Black Spot. Next came a nightmare of a different kind. This time, there was no father killing his children, no supposed factory accidents, and no mobs doing over-the-top vigilante justice. This time, it was a hate crime turned ritual. In 1930, a racist mob calling itself the Maine Legion of White Decency torched the Black Spot, a local nightclub run by black veterans. This was a time when segregation in the United States was still prominent, and white and black people couldn't do cultural activities together. They couldn't have social gatherings. So, the black soldiers decided to build a club where they could drink and dance and rejoice and feel like they were also human. But, of course, some people didn't like this idea. So, while dozens of people were still inside and the air was filled with happiness and laughter, the Maine Legion of White Decency threw gasoline on the walls of the club before setting it on fire. Will Hanlon, Mike's father, escaped the inferno, but not without a horrifying sight. He saw that the It entity appeared above the flames as a giant black bird with balloons, snapping up victims amidst the chaos. Another survivor was a young Dick Halloran, the future cook from The Shining, who fled through a window. Witnesses later spoke of a grinning clown face in the firelight, as if Pennywise himself were celebrating. The official story blamed it on mob violence and segregation, but to locals, it was clear that Pennywise had turned human hatred into a feast. It's believed that the reason why this white supremacist group chose this overkill method was because they had come under the influence of it, and their inhibitions about killing black folks had reduced to zero. Remarkably enough, but not surprisingly, this atrocity also vanished from the public record. No one was prosecuted, the town simply added it to its past woes. Stephen King and recent adaptations have highlighted how this night laid bare Derry's true nature. In fact, the upcoming series, It, Welcome to Derry, will dramatize the Black Spot fire specifically because it shows how human evil fuels the clown. Even now, the locals whisper that on windless nights you can almost hear ghostly jazz and laughter from the ruins of that club. It was one more wound in Derry's soul, another chapter of pain it could feed on later, all swept under the rug in the daylight. 1988, The Losers Club vs. Pennywise. It, Chapter 1 Timeline. Alright, now, first things first, although the novel places Georgie's disappearance in the year 1957 to 58, we've taken the liberty of following the movie since that's the established primary canonical material for the show, and likewise, there would be a time jump in the next entry as well. It all starts in October 1988, or 58 in the novel, with a simple paper boat on a rainy afternoon in Derry, Maine. Bill Denbrough made this boat for his 6-year-old brother Georgie, who happily sends it sailing down a flooded street. It's all fun and games until the boat disappears into a storm drain. When Georgie bends down to reach for it, he finds a strange clown smiling up at him from the dark. The clown calls himself Pennywise the Dancing Clown, chats with the boy for a moment, then tears his arm clean off and drags him into the sewer. Georgie is gone, and Derry forgets faster than it should. The next summer, Bill is still obsessed with finding out what happened. His friends, namely Richie Tozier, Eddie Kasprak, and Stan Uris, try to help, but Bill's convinced Georgie might still be alive. He figures the body could have drifted into a swampy area called the Barrens. Meanwhile, a new kid in school, Ben Hanscom, starts digging through the town's history and finds a pattern of unexplained deaths, missing kids, and disasters that seem to repeat every few decades. As if life wasn't rough enough, Ben also becomes a favorite target for the town bully, Henry Bowers, and his gang. When Henry and his friends chase him, Ben escapes into the Barrens and runs into Bill's group. The kids find the sneaker of another missing child, Betty Ripsum. Around the same time, Henry's friend Patrick wanders into the sewers looking for Ben, but Pennywise finds him first. Beverly Marsh soon becomes a part of the gang as well. She's strong, sharp, and completely misunderstood thanks to ugly rumors spread by classmates and her abusive father. Bill and Ben both fall for her in quiet, awkward ways. Later, they meet Mike Hanlon, an orphan who the group saves from Bowers' cruelty. By then, every one of them has already come face to face with something they can't explain. Ben sees a headless boy, Beverly's sink explodes with blood that only the kids can see, Eddie's chased by a diseased leper, and Stan's haunted by a painting that moves on its own. Mike, meanwhile, relives the fire that killed his parents, and Bill keeps seeing Georgie, or something pretending to be him. It takes a while, but they finally piece it all together. All these nightmares come from the same thing, the clown that killed Georgie. They start calling it It. Through some detective work and a lot of fear, they learn that it has been feeding on Derry's children for centuries. It wakes up every 27 years, takes on the form of whatever its victims fear the most, and kills until it's satisfied. Then it goes quiet again, sleeping beneath the town, right underneath everyone's noses. Every sewer tunnel in Derry leads back to one place, an abandoned, rotting house on Neibold Street, where an old stone well marks the path to whatever lives below. When Pennywise attacks them outright, the losers decide to stop running and face it. They head to Neibold House and step into hell itself. The clown separates them, taunts them, and corners Bill with visions of Georgie. But Beverly, thinking fast, drives a metal rod through Pennywise's head, and the creature slinks back into the well. They survive, but barely, and the group starts to fracture. Fear, guilt, and disbelief take their toll. Only Bill and Beverly remain fully committed to ending it for good. Weeks later, Beverly finally fights back against her father and knocks him unconscious, but she doesn't get far. Pennywise takes her that same night. When the others find out, they regroup immediately. It's time to finish this. Meanwhile, Henry Bowers, driven mad by Pennywise's whispers, kills his own father and tracks the kids down. He attacks them inside the Neibold house, but Mike pushes him down the well. The group presses on, descending into the sewers until they reach its lair. What they find there is a nightmare of a different kind. An underground cavern filled with the remains of circus props, toys, and personal items belonging to missing children. Their bodies float above like balloons, suspended in midair. Beverly is among them, trapped in a trance after seeing the creature's true form, a blinding light deep inside its throat. Ben manages to wake her with a kiss, and she snaps back to life. Then, it tries one last trick. Bill comes face to face with Georgie again, crying and lost. But when the boy starts talking, Bill realizes it's not his brother. Pennywise drops the disguise and grabs him. It offers a deal. Let it eat Bill, and the rest can leave Derry alive. The losers refuse. Together they fight back. Every blow, every scream, every spark of courage chips away at the creature's power. It tries to use their fears against them, but this time they don't flinch. Beaten and cornered, it retreats into the depths, badly wounded and starving. Bill declares that it will die in hibernation. Among the wreckage, they find what's left of Georgie's raincoat. Bill finally breaks down and accepts that his brother is gone, while the others gather around him in quiet support. When it's finally over, the summer's almost gone. Beverly tells the group about a vision she saw while under Pennywise's control. All of them, grown up, back in Derry, fighting it again. The thought chills everyone, but they know she's probably right, so they make a promise. If it ever comes back, so will they. They seal it with a blood oath, cutting their palms and linking hands. Soon after, the group begins to drift apart. One by one, they say their goodbyes, still bound by a secret no one else in Derry will ever believe. Before Beverly leaves to stay with her aunt in Portland, Bill finally says what's been on his mind all summer, that he loves her. She kisses him, and for a brief moment, Derry feels almost peaceful again. But deep underground, something old and hungry sleeps, waiting for its next meal. 2016, Pennywise's return and final defeat. It, Chapter 2 Timeline. This one too begins with a hate crime. In 2016, a young man named Adrian Mellon visits the Derry Carnival with his boyfriend, Don Haggerty. The night starts out fine until a group of local punks, led by John Webby Garton, start yelling slurs at them. Adrian snaps back, and that's enough to set the gang off. They ambush the couple near a bridge, beat them bloody, and toss Adrian into the water below. As he surfaces, gasping and broken, he sees a clown standing on the riverbank, Pennywise. Don arrives moments later, in time to see the clown bite into Adrian's chest and rip out his heart. By the time the police arrive, the only thing left behind is Adrian's blood, spelling "come home" across the bridge wall. Mike Hanlon, the only member of the Old Losers Club still living in Derry, hears the report on a police scanner and knows immediately what it means. It is back. Pennywise has returned. Mike makes the call he swore he'd only make if that day ever came. It's time to bring the others home. The rest of the losers are all in their 40s now and have built successful lives far away from Derry, along with convenient amnesia about everything that happened there. Bill Denbrough is a novelist and screenwriter with a habit of writing stories people love. right up until the ending. Beverly Marsh has become a fashion designer, married to a man who treats her like property. Ben Hanscom, once the chubby kid, is now fit, rich, and alone, working as an architect. Richie Tozier is a famous stand-up comedian who hides behind sarcasm. Eddie Kasprak is a risk analyst married to a woman exactly like his mother, and Stanley Uris is a mild-mannered accountant who still startles easily. When Mike calls, they all feel it. Flash of fear, the burning of old scars, the pull of something they'd hoped they'd buried. One by one, they agree to return, all except for Stanley, who fills his bathtub, writes "I'm sorry," and takes his own life. Meanwhile, the past stirs. A flashback shows Henry Bowers crawling out of the sewers after their first fight with It, only to be arrested for killing his father. Decades later, Henry is locked up in a psychiatric ward when a red balloon floats through his cell door. A familiar grin follows. Henry escapes that night, knife in hand, heading straight for Derry. The surviving losers meet at Jade of the Orient, a Chinese restaurant that's barely changed since they were kids. The reunion is warm and awkward and complete with jokes, memories, and half-truths, until Mike brings up why they're really there. The laughter quickly dies. As they open their fortune cookies, each slip of paper carries a different word, forming the sentence, "Guess Stanley could not cut it." Then the cookies crack open again, spilling out horrors. Bloodied wings, baby heads, writhing creatures. By the time they bolt outside, everyone remembers what they've been trying to forget. On the street, Richie meets a young boy named Dean who recognizes him from TV and repeats one of his jokes. Richie, still shaken, mistakes him for another trick of Pennywise and grabs him before realizing he's real. The boy's parents pull him away, confused. It won't be the last time Richie sees him. Back at the inn, the group fractures. Richie and Eddie accuse Mike of withholding the truth and storm off after hearing that Stanley is dead. Ben follows Beverly, sensing she knows more than she's saying. Bill stays behind with Mike, angry but still listening. Mike takes him to the library, slips something into his water, and finally tells him everything. He's spent years studying Derry's dark history and learning about Pennywise's origins from a nearby native tribe. The elders showed him a vision and a ritual that might finally kill it, called the Ritual of Chud. Bill listens, nauseated, but convinced. For the first time since his childhood, he's ready to fight. The others, scattered across Derry, start reclaiming memories. Mike tells them to each find a personal artifact from that summer to use in the ritual. Beverly returns to her old apartment and finds the pack of cigarettes she hid as a kid, along with Ben's love letter, the one she never knew he wrote. The kindly old woman now living there morphs into Pennywise, half dressed as a frail grandmother, half monstrous. Beverly barely escapes. Bill buys his childhood bike, Silver, and visits the drain where Georgie died. He yells at the sewer like it can hear him, demanding to know why. The answer he gets is worse, because you weren't there. Later, he runs into Dean again and realizes the boy lives in his old house. When Dean says he hears voices from the shower drain, Bill grabs him, panicked, and tells him to leave Derry. Ben visits the old high school and finds the yearbook page Beverly signed. Pennywise taunts him in her form, mocking his loneliness and past weight. Eddie goes to the pharmacy and finds his old inhaler, but his childhood memory of the leper returns, this time for real. He manages to choke the creature with a broken glass, only for it to vomit all over him. Richie revisits the arcade and finds an old game token, triggering memories of being bullied over his sexuality before Pennywise reappears to mock him again. That night, Henry attacks. He stabs Eddie through the cheek, but Eddie fights back and drives him off. Bill finds a message in his room, won't be there for him either, and realizes it's gone after Dean. He races to the carnival and finds the boy inside a hall of mirrors, but before he can reach him, Pennywise smashes through the glass and kills Dean. Bill collapses, watching history repeat itself. The others regroup as Mike barely escapes Henry, saved at the last second by Richie, who finally decides to stay. They track Bill to the old Neibold house. He wants to face it alone, convinced that he's cursed them all, but the others refuse. Inside, Pennywise separates them, mocking their guilt and fears. They push through it, regrouping in the sewers where Mike prepares the Ritual of Chud. Everyone adds their artifact to the fire, like Stanley's shower cap, Beverly's letter, Eddie's inhaler, Ben's yearbook page, Bill's paper boat, Richie's token, and Mike's blood-stained rock. They chant the ancient words, the pottery shakes, and a balloon swells up from within. It bursts, revealing Pennywise in monstrous spider form with blades for legs. Mike's plan collapses. Pennywise reveals that the ritual never worked, and the tribe who tried it died screaming. Mike admits he believed they failed only because they didn't have enough faith. Pennywise goes after him first, and chaos erupts. Each loser is thrown into their own nightmare. Bill relives the day he faked sick and Georgie disappeared. Beverly drowns in a stall filled with blood and the voices of her abusers. Ben is buried alive in dirt. Richie and Eddie open doors labeled scary, very scary, and not scary at all. One by one, they fight their way back. Bill forgives himself. Beverly realizes Ben was the one who wrote her letter. They break free. Richie saves Mike by hurling insults and rocks at Pennywise, but gets caught by the deadlights. Eddie charges in, stabs it through the mouth, and frees Richie, but the victory is short-lived. Pennywise impales him, leaving him dying on the floor. The losers gather around him, shattered, but not broken. Beverly remembers what Eddie said about the leper's weakness. It can be beaten by making it small. They surround Pennywise and hurl every insult they can think of, stripping away his power, calling him weak, calling him nothing. The giant monster shrinks into a frail, gasping clown. Mike tears out its heart, and together they crush it until the light fades. Pennywise, Derry's curse, and centuries of horror end in that single breath. The cavern begins to collapse. They drag Richie out, forced to leave Eddie's body behind. As they reach daylight, the Neibolt house crumbles into the ground. Later, the 5 survivors return to the quarry where they once swam as kids. Ben and Beverly share a kiss. Richie sits silent, staring at the water, and their scars fade away. The blood oath is finally broken. In time, Bill begins a new book and takes a call from Mike, now ready to leave Derry for good. They talk about memory, how they're remembering the good things now, not the horrors. Mike tells him about a letter from Stan written before his death, explaining that he took himself off the board because he knew he'd be too scared to return and didn't want to hold them back. He thanks them for living the life he couldn't. Beverly and Ben start over together, while Richie returns to the bridge and recarves the initials he once made, R+E, accepting that he had always loved Eddie. Mike, finally free, packs up and leaves Derry behind. For the first time in decades, the town feels quiet, and the nightmare is finally over. The aftermath. Derry's curse lives on. Even after Pennywise's final defeat, Derry itself remained forever changed. The town quickly rebuilt, insurance money flowed, new stores opened, and on the surface, everything seemed normal again. In fact, King's mythos implies it even engineered this prosperity. The creature uses its power to maintain the prosperity of Derry, making sure life carries on so its food supply remains plentiful. Meanwhile, Derry itself continued acting strangely. King has said he views Derry as a kind of living organism, one that nurtures the evil within. Its own geography seems complicit. The town's layout and even its people conspire to hide the truth. In King's words, it can keep the entire town of Derry in a subtle, apathetic ignorance whenever children go missing. In other words, the monster warped the town's soul. Adults developed a supernatural indifference to horror, turning Derry into its willing host. Even today, echoes of Pennywise linger in Derry's legacy. Other Stephen King stories treat Derry as cursed ground. It's referenced in novels like Dreamcatcher, Insomnia, 11/22/63, and of course, The Dark Tower. For example, King's notes mention it as a hidden presence in several books, and even it, Welcome to Derry, will dramatize these myths. In King's view, Derry is a symbol of America's hidden rot. When people stay silent about tragedy, the darkness grows unchecked. The nightmare of Derry isn't just one supernatural clown, it's our fear, our hate, and our willful ignorance, all woven into the town's own story. Even with Pennywise gone, those lessons live on in every whispered secret and every unsolved disappearance in Derry. That's all for this one, folks, but if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.